So in the last class, we were in clarity. So this is the we basically left it near clarity. Right now, coming to clarity, you need to understand a concept called turbidity. Turbidity basically means the amount of opalescence or the amount of, in a way, dirt in a particular liquid. Hold on, I think I have an image lying around for turbidity. Uh, One second, I'll show you what is a turbid solution so that you understand better. So if you see this, this is a turbid solution. All right. From low turbidity means more clarity to high turbidity means less clarity, basically. Or vertical, it has more amount of dirt or more amount of opalescence in a way. Okay, not opalescence. It will become more opaque. Okay, to put it simply. Right. One second. Yeah. Now coming back to clarity. So how do you judge the urine based on clarity? So this turbidity due to precipitation of crystals or by non-pathological salts is basically amorphous. This can be in alkaline or in acidic urine. So based on the type of precipitation that is occurring, now what is causing that opaqueness basically? Okay, it can be in what do you call, in acidic urine or in alkaline urine. Normally your urine is slightly acidic, but vertical you can make it alkaline or acidic after you more alkaline or more acidic. Okay, this can be due to certain chemicals that might be present in your vertical this thing in the urine. These are non-pathological in the sense that because of this is not directly due to a diseased condition. This is due to vertical any particular substance in your urine being excreted in excess. Okay, so if there is precipitation from your phosphate or your ammonium urate or carbonate, right, this will cause alkalinity. So this will resolve acidification and it will cause more alkaline urine. So in acidic urine, on the other hand, you will find uric acid and urates to be higher. All right. So these are non-pathological conditions in which what do you call, if one particular substance is high, you will get turbidity, but that turbidity can be again categorized into alkaline and acidic based on what chemical you have in that urine, which is excessive in quantity. You will have what do you call that kind of turbidity. Right now, coming to pathological type, so these are directly in what you call disease conditions. So if you have excessive amounts of leukocytes in your urine, that is a problem. See, normally your urine should not have a lot of what you call certain substances. Now this PPT does not mention what are the normal constituents of your urine. Normally in your urine you should have a few things. Okay, uh, let's say, see, you will generally have a little bit of odor, obviously, and what do you call? You will have color. You will not have what do you call this thing? You should not have blood in it. You should not have ketone bodies in it. Should not have glucose in it. You should not have excessive amount of all of those that I mentioned on top: phosphates, carbonates, all of that. Okay, normally urine will not have that. Very trace amounts or negligible amounts. Whenever you are seeing something, there might be problem all the way from your it can be any systemic infection, or it can be a systemic disorder, or it can be a problem in your urinary tract itself. So all the way from your kidneys to your urinary tract, anywhere it might be a problem which will be categorized in your pathological, wherein you will see abnormal what do you call findings. So you will find leukocytes, you will find bacteria, you will find chyluria, you will find lipids. All of these should not be normally present in your urine. All right. Now if you're finding leukocytes, the urine will generally be cloudy in color. Okay, this is almost like phosphates, but it does not dissolve on acidification. Meaning if you add a little bit of acid to the urine, in case of excessive amount of phosphates here when you are checking an alkaline urine, this redissolves on acidification. Meaning if you add a little bit of acid, it will dissolve. All right, because it is an alkaline substance, if I'm adding a little bit of acid, what will happen? Acid plus alcohol will mix. You will get a salt and you will get water, right? That is the basic reaction when you get when you mix a alkaline and a acidic substance. Here what is happening is, if you have leukocytes, you will have cloudy urine, but it is not due to phosphates, because it will not dissolve when you add acid in it. So you can clearly know that it is not due to acids, it is because of leukocytes being present. All right, leukocytes are your WBCs. आप लोगों को WBCs RBCs ब्लड का पिक्चर पढ़ा है अभी थोड़ा तो भी बेसिक या blood altogether, anything about blood?
No, sir.
No idea. Okay. Okay. At least anyway, you will know what are WBCs, right? White blood cells. They are a component of your blood, right? So that will cause cloudy urine. Now, if you have uniform opalescence, opalescence is basically the urine will look opal in color. Have you guys ever seen opal the stone? Okay, hold on. I have a image for opalescence here. One second. Hmm, where did it go? Right. So if you can see this image, it is it has a slightly blue tinge in white. All right, that is opal. Okay, that is opalescent color. Basically, your urine will be in what do you call opalescent in color. If you get that, you can know that there is a problem in the urine pertaining to bacteria. So if what do you call the urine has bacteria, this can be due to a systemic infection, this can be due to a urinary tract infection. Sometimes if systemic infections are affecting your kidneys, then also you can get what do you call bacteria in urine. Or if you have a particular urinary tract disease itself like UTI or something, then also you will have excessive amount of bacteria. Generally bacteria should not be present in your urine. All right, altogether they should not be present. So if you're having bacteria in your urine, you'll be able to see them as uniform opalescence. All right, this will remain on acidification or centrifugation, in the sense that even if I add acid or I centrifuge it, okay, I hope you know what is centrifuging, right? Centrifugal forces, centripetal centrifugal forces पढ़े थे ना? So centrifugation is the same thing. You will what do you call put the test tube in a centrifuge and you will rotate it very fast. All right. So what do you call even upon centrifugation or acidification, this opalescence will remain. It will not go. In normal urine, that will not happen. It will become clear. All right. If you have RBCs in your urine, the urine will appear smoky. On the other hand, if you have mucus in your urine, it will appear hazy. So it will not be hazy in the sense I अब hazy को कैसा बोलना? For example, if you have ever woken up very early in the morning and you can see what do you call you can literally see haze in, especially in winter months in North India and all, you can see haze around. You'll see a lot of smog and what do you call yeah, basically smog. Even if it is not winter, it is something like smog. Okay, it will look hazy. Urine will look hazy in that sense. Okay, if you have seen smog, then you know what is smog. So coming to this thing, milky urine, if you are having milky urine that specifically contains lymphatic vessels, or if there is what you call lymph present in that urine, you can deduce that this can be due to a lymphatic rupture in your urinary tract. Now you know your urinary tract will also have a supply of lymph vessels. If there is a problem in your lymph vessels where they are getting ruptured and lymph is leaking out into your urinary tract, this specifically happens in your filariasis. You've studied filariasis a little bit in intermediate. I hope you guys studied. Wuchereria bancrofti is the one that will cause filariasis. If you guys have been taught, I'm not sure whether you've been taught or not, but intermediate में generally रहता था पहले. So filariasis is a condition that will cause lymphadenitis, lymphangiopathy, all of that. It will cause rupture and disease in your lymph node because those that parasite will basically thrive and grow in your lymph node. Okay, this will cause a milky kind of urine, right? Then if you have candida infection for which you are treating with paraffin, right, especially vaginal creams, then you can have pseudocaluria. So this is not true caluria where you're not having, you still have milky color, but this is not due to lymph rupture, but this is due to a paraffin based vaginal cream that you are using for a candida infection. So if there is a lady who has candida infection and they are using paraffin based cream, they will get milky urine. So they might suspect, the doctor might suspect that it is due to a lymph rupture, but if the what do you call, if they are already on paraffin based this thing, then it is called pseudocaluria. It looks like caluria, but it is not true caluria. Right. Coming to lipiduria, another condition in which you will see milky urine is if the person has nephrotic syndrome. All right, we'll get into nephrotic syndrome some other time, but it is a disorder of your kidneys, where your kidneys are not working properly, right? Excessive amount of uric acid and urates are being collected. In any case, your urine will also have a lot of triglycerides and cholesterol. TGLs are triglycerides. Okay, your urine will have a lot of triglyceride and cholesterol, which will give you the characteristic milky color in the urine. Okay. This can also happen in skeletal muscle trauma. If what do you call, someone has skeletal muscle trauma, or if someone has a condition like rhabdomyolysis, in that condition, if there is skeletal muscle trauma, then you will get lipiduria as well, right? Milky urine specifically. Now, coming to odor, see, these are very, urine analysis in general is a very simple topic. There is very little to understand, a lot to memorize. So you have to approach this from that aspect. Because understanding is very easy in this. Because of this reason, this is happening. This reason, this is happening. There's no complexity in understanding. The complexity will come in remembering or memorizing. So any urine, any analysis for that matter, if you take liver, if you take kidney, if you take any other thyroid, basic mechanism will be simple. It is not that hard, but you have to memorize it. That is the only trick in this. All right. Now coming to odor, normally your urine will be slightly aromatic, right? Until and unless it is like completely clear urine. If it is slightly, it has tinges of yellow and all. If it is yellowish in color, then definitely it will have. As such, clear urine will also have a slight aromatic odor. I'm not sure whether, okay, आप लोगों को urine के experiments नहीं हुए ना? So if you have urine experiment sometime, then you can see if you ever handle urine in a, what do you call, uh, flask, or in what you call a measuring tube, then you'll be able, or even in a test tube, you'll be able to smell the urine. You will get a slightly aromatic odor basically. Now if you let it be, what will happen is this aromatic odor will become ammoniacal. It will smell like ammonia, right? Obviously, for all of this, for you to understand all of these smells, you have to first go to a chemistry lab and smell them. So if any one of you have ever smelled ammonia, you will know what ammonia smells like. Right? If you let urine be, let's suppose you collect urine in a test tube and you let it be for a while, initially you will have an aromatic odor which will turn into a faint ammoniacal odor. Okay, slightly ammoniacal on standing because of the ureas present. If there is bacteria present in your urine, they will have ureas which will convert your what you call urea into basically it will be converted into ammonia. Urea will be converted into ammonia through ureas, right? That ureas is secreted by the bacteria. Now coming to some peculiar smells, if you have certain conditions, you will have different kind of smell. Ketonuria is a condition in which what you call, the patient generally has diabetes. That is when they will develop ketonuria. Okay, most of the time, this basically indicates a condition in which the patient's urine has ketones. Okay, if you have studied ketones in organic chemistry, you know that they have a fruity scent, right? Someone who has diabetic ketoacidosis, meaning they will have a lot of ketones in their bodily secretions, not just in their urine. So their what you call, breath will also start smelling like fruit. It will start smelling fruity. This is specifically because of ketones present in your gastric fluids, present in your urine. So your urine will also become fruity. Right? If someone is having fruity urine, that generally indicates ketonuria. If it is what you call mousy smell, then it is phenylketonuria, specific kind of ketonuria. If it is a fishy smell, then it is UTI by Proteus. Okay, specific kind of UTI, Proteus or tyrosanemia. Right, either of those two, if they are causing UTI, urinary tract infection, then it will be fishy in smell. Now, if you are having UTI through E. coli, okay, Escherichia coli, or by old standing urine, so if what do you call, if it is a very old standing urine, meaning you have taken the sample in a test tube and you have left it for a long time, then also you will get a ammoniacal odor. This ammoniacal odor is stronger than the one you get initially. So here, initially when we told that on standing your urea will be converted into ammonia, that will give what they call the ammoniacal odor. This is a faint ammoniacal odor. Okay, you'll get a faint smell, very slight smell. In this condition, ammoniacal, where you have a UTI, either UTI due to E. coli, or when you have a old standing urine, meaning you have left it on the test tube for a long period of time, then you will have a strong ammoniacal odor. Right. One thing is, due to complete conversion of all the urea present in urine into ammonia, or E. coli basically causes again the same reaction. It will cause urea to be converted into ammonia. Different type of bacteria but that will also convert urea into ammonia, where you will get a strong ammoniacal odor, right? Now, foul smell generally indicates UTI, but you cannot pinpoint which type of UTI it is, right? So for that, you will have to do more diagnostic tests. In general, if you have a rotten or foul smell, then that will indicate UTI, right? Now, coming to specific gravity, I hope you guys understood that. Please feel free to stop me anywhere if you're not understanding anything. All right. There's very little to understand, but in case you're not understanding anything, or if you want me to repeat any particular part, feel free to tell me. All right. Either through your microphones or through chat. In any case, now coming to specific gravity, see, specific gravity is also called relative mass density. So this is you are basically uh, measuring the density of one substance with respect to water. Okay, the density of water at 4 degrees centigrade is what you call 1. Okay, this relative density or specific gravity is in relation to that. That is why it is called relative or specific density. Right? This fellow will not have any what you call units, because it is a relative unit. For example, if I tell what you call, if I have a unit of meter by meter, okay, so I will get a particular value which is unitless. The same way, relative, whenever you have something related to what you call a particular standard, or you have something that is relating to a different unit, then you will have no units. Basically, if here I'm measuring the density. If I have, let's suppose, a box, okay, some box, and I'm telling the what you call density of that box is 5 kg per meter cube, for example. All right. Now, if I just tell the density itself, I know the units, that is kg per meter cube. But if I relate it to some other object, meaning I'm measuring the density of what you call this box to the density of a piece of metal or piece of iron of the same size. All right. So I'm what you call having a relative density, how dense, how much more denser or how much less denser this box is compared to the piece of iron. Hence, I will get no units in that sense. That is why specific gravity is the same thing. It will not have any units. Right. Now, see, if you see the definition, this is the ratio of weight of volume of urine, weight of volume of urine, okay, to the weight of the same volume of distilled water. So you take the weight. That is how you, what do you call, understand density. You use kgs, right? At constant temperature, you have to be careful of that. At constant temperature, because at different temperatures, your density will change because your weight will change. Volume and weight, both of them will change, because of which relative density can change. All right. Normally, if you have urine, that should have a relative density slightly higher than water. All right. If you take a random sample as well, stop drawing on this. If you have a random sample of urine as well, generally what will happen is the relative density in adults that you will get is slightly above 1, right? So you get 1.015 to 1.025, something around that ballpark. All right, slightly higher. Now there are a few conditions in which your what you call urine will be more than or less than that specific gravity. So if you have specific gravity which is lower than 1.007, basically lower than 1, that will be your hypostenuria. Okay, if specific gravity is lower than normal, that is hypostenuria. If it is more than normal, that is hyperstenuria. If it is fixed, it is isostenuria. All right, you have to memorize these uh, wordings. Once you start using it again and again, it will become natural. It will not that hard. Now, coming to conditions that will cause specific vertical gravity to change, if it is increasing, generally the patient will either be dehydrated or they will have glycosyluriia. See, whenever we are talking about density of urine, let's suppose I am putting more substances, or for example, I have two liquids. Okay, let's suppose both of them are water. Okay, I have 10 ml of water in two different flasks. All right, what I am doing in one flask is I am adding a few particles of iron. On the other hand, I'm on the other jug or in the other tube, I'm adding a few particles of carbon. All right, now depending on what substance is present inside that particular liquid, the density or the specific gravity will change, especially in relation to each other. All right, depending on what is present inside that liquid, the specific gravity will change. In the same way, here specific gravity of urine is changing because of, let's suppose it is diabetes mellitus, it is because of glucose, excessive amount of glucose that is being present in urine. All right, I have two particular liquids. I'll repeat once again. If I have test tube 1 and test tube 2, both of them have 10 ml of some liquid, okay, XYZ, some liquid. And I'm adding what you call some particles of iron, okay, small particles of iron in test tube 1, and I'm adding something which is less dense in test tube 2. Or even if I add the same iron whichever I was used in test tube 1, but lesser amount. So if I added, let's suppose, 50 molecules of iron in test tube 1 and I'm adding 20 molecules of iron in test tube 2, the specific gravity of test tube 1, the liquid in test tube 1, will be higher because of basically more amount of iron or more amount of substance dissolved in it. That is how specific gravity will increase in relation to each other. All right, you have to give a specific standard when you're telling what you call specific gravity or relative density. You have to relate it to something. So I'm comparing test tube 1 to test tube 2. Then I'll be able to see, right, this is more denser than the previous one, or test tube A is more denser than the liquid in test tube A is more denser than test tube B. All right, I hope you understood the concept. Right now, what causes increase in urine specific gravity is diabetes mellitus. This is specifically because increase in glucose. All right. Second, dehydration. Now, dehydration does not increase density directly. It will decrease the volume of urine. Okay. So if I have that, if I take that same test tube, let's suppose what you call in test tube A. Now, instead of adding more amount of iron, I'm decreasing the amount of liquid. All right. So in relation to the volume of that liquid, eh, the number of particles have increased. So initially I had 50 particles of iron in 10 ml of that liquid. Now I'm having 50 particles of iron in, let's say, 5 ml of that liquid. Even though the number of particles have not changed, the volume of that particular liquid has changed, because of which density will change. All right. I hope you guys are understanding. These are pretty complex what you call concepts, at least when you are coming across them for the first time. If you're not understanding anything, you have to let me know, or else I will not be able to gauge. All right. Please feel free to stop me at any time. Now, dehydration means same thing is happening. When you are decreasing the amount of fluid, or let's suppose if I have a normal person, urinates around 1.5 liters in a day. All right. So if I have uh, different chemicals and different electrolytes present in that 1.5 liters. Now, if you have red kidney, there are several vertical particles that are normally present in urine. Now, let's suppose I'm decreasing that volume of urine. Instead of 1.5 liters, I'm making it 1 liter. All right. The amount of particles that are supposed to be excreted, I'm keeping that constant. Meaning, initially, let's suppose some what you call 5,000 particles were being excreted in 1.5 liters of urine. Now, because of dehydration, those same 5,000 particles are being excreted in 1 liter of urine. So, relatively, its density has increased, right, to the initial 1.5 liters. That is how specific gravity will increase even in dehydration. All right, even though you are not increasing the particle number, you are decreasing the volume, right? Then there is proteinuria. Proteins are naturally heavier objects, right? They are heavier what do you call chemicals, heavier substances, right? Nephrotic syndrome may proteins will start getting accumulated because of extensive damage to your kidneys. What will happen is proteins will start getting excreted in your urine, which in turn will increase the specific gravity of your urine. Same for glycosuria. This might not, see, when you are telling about glycosuria, this might not be related to diabetes mellitus as such. It can be a disorder in which simply glucose or glycogen is being excreted in excessive quantity. All right, this might not be, it can be, but not always related to diabetes. Right, those are all the conditions in which specific gravity, some of the conditions at least, in which specific gravity of urine will increase. When it will decrease, if you have polydipsia. Polydipsia is a condition in which you drink less, or if you have what you call diabetes insipidus, in the sense that you will have more amount of urination. If you are urinating more, means that the amount of, or the volume of urine that you urinate will increase, right? If you know a patient with diabetes insipidus, they will go more frequently and they will void more each time. All right, even if they are not voiding more each time, simply because they keep on going again and again, what will happen is the density of that liquid will decrease. So the same 5,000 particles, instead of being excreted in 1.5 liters, now they are being excreted in 2 liters or 2.5 liters, right? That is basically increased amount of urination but the amount of particles that were supposed to be excreted are the same, right? So what will happen? Density will decrease, specific gravity will decrease. Also, if someone is taking diuretics, diuretics are drugs that will cause diuresis. It will cause increased amount of urination. So if you have a patient with, generally diuretics are used in patients with blood pressure, high blood pressure. All right. So if someone has hypertension, they are prescribed diuretics. These diuretics, if you've gone to your what do you call clinicals, then you will have seen diuretics. Furosemide is one very common what do you call diuretic that you use. I'm not sure what kind of brand you were using in your hospital, whichever hospital you were, but furosemide is one, torsemide is one. If you ever what do you call hold the prescription or you hold the tablet up, you'll be able to see the name right on the strip. Those diuretics will cause decrease in specific gravity because they are causing increase in urination. Another thing, early stages of CKD. So if someone is having kidney disease, especially early stages of kidney disease, in them urination might increase, which in turn will cause, rather than urination increasing, they will have a problem in reabsorption. Reabsorption also. Basically, what will happen is specific gravity will decrease because of both of these conditions. There is a problem in reabsorption and secretion, and there is a problem in what you call the amount of urine being excreted. Both of them together will decrease the specific gravity of your urine. Right, now we'll shift to the other one. Hold on 1 second. Right, now coming to this thing, what do you call chemical tests for urine or chemical examination for urine, those are all physical exams. All right, what we did initially, up to specific gravity, you are checking for what you call the turbidity, you are checking for clarity, you're checking all of that. The physical components, odor, you're checking for all of that are basically physical what you call quantifications of urine. This will be chemical. This is the more important one. All right, from here on out, again, you don't need to go too deep into all of them. And if you see the chemical, this is, I will forward the PDF anyway. If you see these, the methods are fairly simple. What you need to do is memorize them. There is very little to understand in this. You'll understand why it is very little to understand. They're very easy to understand in any case. Now let's suppose you're checking for proteins in urine. Normally, if someone is urinating or if you're checking the amount of urine in a person for 24 hours, so if you're attaching a vertical urination bag to the person, generally they should urinate around 150 mg of protein, not more than 150 mg of protein in 24 hours, right? Or 10 mg per 100 ml. That is in a single sample. If you're taking a single sample from a person of 100 ml urine, that should normally contain 10 mg. Now, how do you test excessive proteins in urine? Right, there are two ways you can do it. One is through acetic acid test. You apply heat and you add a little bit of acetic acid. That is one way. Or you use sulfur salicylic acid. Right. What you do is sulfur salicylic acid will neutralize protein, resulting in precipitation of that vertical protein. So you will be able to see precipitate that is sedimenting down. All right. I hope you guys have some time or the other seen what is a precipitate. All right. I'll enlarge this a little bit. Right. Uh, I'm hoping that you guys have seen what is a precipitate, but in any case, what will happen is the first test, you heat the substance, you add a little bit of acetic acid, you will see precipitation. That is one way, right? The second way, you directly add sulfur salicylic acid that will neutralize proteins and cause what you call precipitation. In both of these cases, you will see precipitation. Depending on the amount of precipitate, you will be able to gauge whether or not proteins are high. All right, that is the basic principle in this. Now, what causes proteinuria? There are a few conditions in which proteinuria or basically excessive amount of protein is present in your urine. Right? If it is a pre-renal disorder, in the sense that this is not a problem in your kidneys, right? Hence it is pre-renal. This will be Addison's disease where there is a problem in your adrenal gland, or it can be simple fever or eclampsia. Eclampsia is a complication of pregnancy, right? It's a complication of pregnancy in which the patient will have seizures and hypertension. All right, both of them combined is eclampsia. You will study about this a little bit more when you come across OBG. But eclampsia is a particular complication of pregnancy wherein the patient is developing seizures along with hypertension. Or in general, if the patient has just hypertension, that can also cause proteinuria, hemoglobinuria, meaning hemoglobin is being disintegrated and it is being what you call thrown out of your body through urine. Or rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis is a condition in which your skeletal muscle will get damaged. All right, because of damage of skeletal muscle, you will get the end products of muscle degeneration, that is protein. Renal conditions are those that relate to kidney themselves are glomerulonephritis. So all cases of glomerulonephritis, if you have any kind of glomerulonephritis where there is inflammation in your glomerulus, that can cause renal, or that can cause proteinuria. Or if you have nephrotic syndrome or pyelonephritis, pyelonephritis is basically a bacterial infection in your kidney, right? That is causing inflammation, which in turn causes proteinuria. Or post-renal, if there is blockage of any kind. So lesions are damages. Okay, small damage is called lesion. Lesion in your renal pelvis or in your urethra, both cystitis and prostatitis, both of them you will be able to see, in both of them you'll be able to see proteinuria. Or in severe UTI, so if someone has a severe urinary tract infection, especially the upper kind, then what do you call, you'll be able to see proteinuria in them. Now, minimal, you'll have three categorization: minimal proteinuria, moderate, and excessive proteinuria. Minimal will be anything where you have less than 0.5 grams per day. So here we were measuring, if you can see, 150 mg in 24 hours. That is normal. So from that we are jumping to 500 gram, vertical 0.5 grams. So that is 500 mg. All right, please be careful about these units. Okay, gram alag hai, mg alag hai. That is milligram. Normally we are seeing 150 milligrams. Here minimal proteinuria will indicate anything less than 500 milligrams. So 3 times that of normal, almost a little more, over 3 times, right? So what will cause minimal proteinuria? Or somewhere around, let's suppose यहाँ पर 400 300 ऐसा बोल रहा. So exercise will cause, because of muscle damage, or fever can cause this, emotional stress, hypertension, renal tubular dysfunction. Polycystic kidney disease is a condition in which there will be several cysts being formed in your kidney, causing kidney damage. All right, cysts are small. This can be fluid filled. Basically, they are small pouches. Okay, they'll imagine them as pimples in your kidney. Okay, on the only difference is that they are not pimples as such. They are small cysts which contain fluid. All right, if you see an image of cyst, you will understand what is a cyst. There'll be small spherical and circular pouches containing fluid, right? So if you have a polycystic kidney disease, if someone has PCOS, or you know what is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, it is the same cyst but present in the kidneys, right? Or lower UTI, if it is involving specifically the lower part of your urinary tract, your urethra and down, then that will be what you call cause minimal proteinuria. If someone is having moderate proteinuria, generally they have one of the underlying causes. They either have chronic glomerulonephritis, or they have congestive cardiac failure, right? Or chronic cardiac failure, either way. Or pyelonephritis, where they are having a infectious condition, bacteria. Preeclampsia is something, another complication of pregnancy that occurs before eclampsia. That is why preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a condition in which this will happen after 20th week. Okay, if someone is pregnant, roughly around 20th week or after 20th week, what will happen is, if someone is developing a complication of preeclampsia, in them there will be excessively high amount of blood pressure. I am telling somewhere around 160, 170 by 100 mmHg, very high, right? Where you will have to intervene through drugs. Preeclampsia is a condition in which only blood pressure will be very high. Eclampsia is a condition in which both blood pressure is high and they will have seizures. Okay, seizures are fits, basically fits plus convulsions. Those are seizures. Then you have multiple myeloma. Myeloma is a condition in which your B cells are getting destroyed. Okay, or you can also tell there is a cancer in your B cells. B cells are your plasma B cells. Now, I'm not sure whether you've been taught what is a B cell. Your WBCs can be categorized in a few ways. Okay, you will have agranulocytes and granulocytes. Your granulocytes will be eosinophils, neutrophils, and eosinophils. Those are the ones that you. Um, I'm not sure whether you've been taught this or not. Basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils are granulocytes. They will have granules. Agranulocytes, the ones that do not have granules, they will be categorized into lymphocytes and monocytes. In lymphocytes, you will have two types, B and T cells. That B cell is specifically the one I'm referring to in myeloma. What will happen in multiple myeloma is that particular B cell, the agranular site of WBC, one type of WBC will have cancer. Right. Now coming to market proteinuria, in this you have excessive amount of proteinuria where this is going 3 grams per day. So this is hundreds of times more than normal. Please remember we had normal which was 150 mg. Here we are talking about 3 grams, 150 mg versus 3000 mg. All right, that is almost a 20 times spike. So if you are having proteinuria which is 20 times more than normal, generally it will occur either in one of these conditions, right? It is acute glomerular nephritis. Acute is something that is occurring very, very quickly. Chronic glomerular nephritis, which is very severe. So late stages of chronic glomerular nephritis, meaning someone has had chronic glomerular nephritis for a long period of time, and now they are literally on their deathbed. That is when they will have this kind of proteinuria. Or in nephrotic syndrome, or if you have a complication of diabetes called diabetic nephropathy. Diabetic nephropathy is a complication of diabetes wherein your vertical your kidneys will get damaged basically. All right, the nephrons will get damaged beyond repair in diabetic nephropathy. Renal amyloidosis. Amyloidosis is a condition in which there is a particular type of protein called amyloid that will start getting accumulated in your body. Renal amyloidosis literally means that protein is getting accumulated in your kidney. So what will happen is this protein will hinder normal functioning, in turn causing damage as well. That is why you'll have proteinuria. Lupus is a systemic lupus erythematosus. That is the main disease. Lupus is an autoimmune condition in which your own immunity is attacking your own cells. Okay, though the exact cause is not known, what we do know is lupus is a what do you call autoimmune condition, and one complication of lupus is lupus nephritis, wherein you will have inflammation in your nephrons. Now, coming to the procedure of your what do you call measuring proteins in urine, if you have excess or not. The heat and acetic acid method is fairly simple. What you do is you take a test tube, you'll fill it 3/4 with clear urine. You take a urine sample and you fill that test tube with that, and you boil only the upper portion. Okay, if you can see this image, you'll boil only the upper portion, not the whole test tube. All right, be careful with the flame. Don't hold it very close to your hand. Now, once you boil, what will happen is if proteins, phosphates, or carbonates are present, that will develop turbidity. It will become opaque. It will become a little bit of a little bit dirty, literally. It will become turbid. Now, in the same thing, if you add 1 to 3 drops of glacial acetic acid, 10% glacial acetic acid itself is 60%. Of that, you are adding 10%. Okay, this is concentration. Okay, not the ml. 1 to 3 drops will be ml. 10% glacial acetic acid basically means that you are taking 90 ml water and 10 ml glacial acetic acid. That is how you get 10% glacial acetic acid. If you add 1 to 3 drops of this, if in case turbidity is due to phosphate precipitation, this fellow will clear up immediately if you add glacial acetic acid. If it is due to carbonates, it will disappear with effervescence. Effervescence is basically foam formation. Okay, you will see effervescence is what you get when you add water to ENO. All right, if you have ever consumed ENO in your life, I'm sure someone or the other has consumed ENO. Right, if you are having what do you call indigestion or something, if you add a little bit of water, immediately there'll be a lot of gas being released and a lot of effervescence. That is effervescence, basically a bubbles being formed and all of that. That reaction is effervescence. So if you have carbonates in your urine, because of which you are having that color, then you will be able to see effervescence. If that turbidity persists, meaning there is no clearance at all, in both of these conditions it is precipitating. Phosphate रहा तो precipitate होके clear हो जा रहा है, carbonate रहा तो effervescent होके clear हो जा रहा. If it is not clearing in both of these conditions, it means that it is due to albumin. Albumin is a vertical protein, right? So if it persists for a long period of time, the turbidity persists for a long period of time, this is due to albumin. All right, let's stop here. I have less than 1 minute. I hope you guys understood the class. I'm not sure how many of you all were even listening.